Prof, you okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
No problem. I'm just trying to.
Great. We'll get lots of folk who can't make this particular session, but would like to join us later. So, good morning, 3rd of August, and yeah, we're 3 days into South Africa's Women Month, and just so pleased that we've got Professor Sope Williams, who's joined us to talk about this very important topic of building gender into preferential procurement policies. Now, for those who don't know, Prof Williams is, and I took the photo off of your LinkedIn profile there, Prof, is Professor and Deputy Director of the African Procurement Law Unit in Stellenbosch University. Your LinkedIn profile talks about integrity, procurement, ethics matters, anti-corruption, and blockchain technology. We'd love to talk about blockchain one day. But Prof, you are well known in this public procurement law space and highly respected. And just so, thank you for joining us today. And I can't help but just mention that you were across in the UK. And I'm not sure where you are at the moment, whether you're in the Western Cape.
Yes, I'm home. I'm home in Cape Town.
Good. You were across in the UK and recently gave a paper as well at that very significant public procurement law conference that took place. How did that go?
The conference was really good. I mean, obviously, it's the first time we've been face to face since COVID, so it was really nice to see, colleagues who have become friends and all that. And it was because of that, it was really well attended, and because there's been so much flux in the world and in procurement as well, we had really a good range of presentations, on things that are happening in things like environmental issues, obviously integrity, emergency contracting. I spoke about gender procurement in the plenary and in one of the workshops as well. So it was, it was very international, and a lot of insight from countries that you wouldn't normally hear from, like Israel, Russia was represented as well. And yeah, really participants from all over the world, and it was really insightful.
Fantastic. How was your paper received?
It was very well received. I think a lot of people don't realize how shockingly bad the inclusion of women in public sector supply chains are. And the research that I've been doing for the last year and a half, actually, since early 2020, has been focusing on looking at gender procurement. We say gender responsive procurement in Africa. So I've done a lot of empirical research, talking to women entrepreneurs, women-owned businesses, public procurement regulators, officials, to try to get a sense of what the barriers are, what the bottlenecks are, and what we can do to actually make a difference in that space. So people were surprised as to some of the problems that women face when they try to access public contracts.
Very relevant to the discussion today, Prof. Thank you. And yeah, well done. I believe some of your colleagues didn't manage to get across. They were on the agenda, and Dr. Alison Anthony couldn't get her visa organized in time, and I think that Songezo Mabete, he also had a challenge to get across. So very pleased that you made it, and well done. Thank you for that. Just is it published? Is that paper available? Is there a written
one
version
of the papers
of that?
is, yes. So the one that speaks directly to South Africa is available on the Open Contracting Partnership website. I think it's called Equity and Inclusion of Women-Owned Businesses in Public Procurement in South Africa. So quite long, but it's available. It's been there since the end of 2020. The other one, which actually looks at 5 of the countries in East Africa, so Ethiopia, Rwanda, Uganda, Tanzania, Kenya, is just being finalized now, so it's not yet publicly available.
Thank you. We'll make sure that we go to the open contracting site and get that. Today's topic really is about building gender into organs of states' preferential procurement policies that they're all busy working on at the moment.
Yeah.
And you know, those have to be in place. They have to be approved by the 26th of January next year. And you know, whatever we can share with the folk who are online today, they will certainly value your perspectives. But before we go on to the future, let's just maybe reflect on the past. You know, we've had the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act since 2001. You know, we've had the regulations. We've had 3 sets of those regulations over the past 22 years. Since 2011, the focus of that preferential procurement regulation has been around the B-BBEE scorecard, and using the B-BBEE scorecard as the primary mechanism then for deciding the preference points. Has it worked? What are your thoughts? What have you seen around the success of the scorecard in the past while? Now, I see that. There, go ahead, Prof. I'm just going to turn off my video just to help with the bandwidth.
Okay. All right. So has it worked? So the B-BBEE scorecard, it was intentional in its design, but I would say that my view is that it hasn't done what we expected it to do. At the end of the day, we're looking for a way to democratize the economy. We're looking for a way to increase, you know, Black economic empowerment. We're looking for a way to increase the number of successful Black entrepreneurs. We're looking for a way to reduce the racial disparities in wealth and income in South Africa, right? So that's sort of the big picture. And so the scorecards had these elements, you know, saying basically if a company can prove that they were active and would get scores for these 5 elements, then they would have preferences or priority, if you like, in terms of public contracts. So we were looking at, you know, ownership, you know, being owned by Black people, management, skills, development of Black youth or Black, you know, entrepreneurs, and then enterprise development or supply development. So building in Black businesses into your own supply chain. And then I think the final one was socio-economic development. But I think that what has happened was that it became a little bit tokenistic. And I'm not talking about tokenism in the sense of, you know, putting a Black person on your board and, you know, giving them paper ownership without any real powers. But I'm saying tokenistic in this, companies found ways to, you know, kind of tick off these boxes without actually making any real impact. So if we're looking at sense that we're trying to change the structure of the economy, we're trying to reduce income, racial income disparities, we're trying to address Black poverty, that has not really happened on a big scale because, you know, as I said, companies were able to do the barest minimum and still be able to achieve these scores and go on to win contracts. So the structure of the economy that we have has more or less remained the same. Yes, we have more, you know, wealthy Black people. We have more Black elites, but we still haven't seen reductions in income disparities. We haven't seen real change in South Africa. And when I say this, I need to put the caveat that also perhaps procurement is not also the way to achieve or procurement may not be the most appropriate forum to try to address these issues that were a legacy of apartheid. Because even though procurement under apartheid was, very intentional, prioritizing white businesses and locking out all other businesses belonging to people of color. That was not the only strategy used by the apartheid government. So for us to have an African-led government that puts all its eggs in the procurement basket is a little bit, it's a little bit silly, because procurement cannot bear the weight of the legacy of apartheid, and us feel that this is the right space to address it. Yes, procurement spend can do certain things and should be targeted at doing other things apart from buying the goods and services we need, but the focus of procurement as the way to change the structure of the South African economy, as a way to address Black poverty, racial income disparities. My own opinion is that procurement is not the place where that the focus should be on. Procurement has its place, but it seems now that procurement is looked at as the savior, and it definitely should not be that. So to answer your question, I feel the scorecards haven't worked in the way that we thought they would, because they haven't had the impact. If you're looking at what was it that they were intended to achieve, I don't think that they have achieved that.
So going forward, the Preferential Procurement Regulations 2017, they end on the 25th of January, 26th of January, we need new preference policies in place, and the organs of state need to develop that. Yeah. Now, one of the key questions they're asking is, should that BBBEE scorecard continue to be the core of their preference policies going forward? And I didn't, just to bring this back, be sure that we also want to focus on gender this month. This is not just getting racial issues sorted out, but we want to also focus on gender. So, Prof, your thoughts on that? Is it I mean, enough? Is it the only thing we've got? Do you think there's some validity or some value in using it going forward?
It has been seen as, many companies see it as, okay, this is the hurdle I have to overcome. I need to do get the prize. So the focus is not really, companies don't have a focus on, I need to more inclusive, I need parts to address the legacies of the past. We don't have that because I should say don't have that, the intent, then they do, as I said, the minimum in order to get the scores, but in terms of their practices, they don't have, they don't have any desire. And I use that in a neutral way, not to say that companies are, but they don't really have any desire to fulfill the BEE code standard. That's not their focus. Their focus is, let me get through references. So I think if we're keeping the codes, I think we need to have a discussion on how do we want to change corporate practice, we want to change the markets. We want the markets to say, look, we think it's important that we develop Black entrepreneurs. We think it's important that we do our quota to address racial income inequalities. We think it's important that we address, gender empowerment. So we have to, we have approached it, hasn't given the companies the right incentive to actually have the impact that they want. And I'll give an example. There's a company in the US that for some reason the board decided, look, we need to ensure in our corporate procurement that we give a fair chance to women-owned businesses. And over, I think, a space of 5 years or something, they actually realized that they had saved over $4 million in their corporate procurement because they intentionally thought, women-owned businesses that could supply. The businesses that were not up to scratch, they engaged them in real supply development activities so that those women could participate in their own corporate procurement. And at the end of the day, they found out that they were better off. Their bottom line was better off because these companies were a lot, many of them smaller, but a lot more innovative, a lot more agile, a lot able to respond quicker to the needs of the bigger company. So, but that company had a distinct mission, no, we're going to do this because we think this is the right thing to do. And they pursued that, and it had an impact that they didn't even realize it would have. So I'm saying that if we're going to keep the codes, we need to reframe them in a way that incentivizes companies to actually pursue real change, as opposed to just, okay, I need to tick this box in order to access public contracts, because without that, companies will still just be going through the motions and we will still be here, But the other thing is that we also need to think of other ways to incentivize companies, not just in terms of public procurement, but of course, in terms of their own, in terms of their own internal procurements, so that you're not just doing this so you can obtain public contracts, but you're doing this because you think this is the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do for South Africa, for the, the country that is sustaining you. And you ensure that you keep those policies and practices going in your own, within your own organization. So you become what we call in procurement speak a gender responsive enterprise. That your policies, your practices, support gender equality, support women's economic empowerment, and we see that coming through, not just because you want to access public contracts. So I'll say that there is an element of the codes that are important, but I think the way companies are incentivized hasn't enabled us to actually get the benefits that we can get if this was done, properly. I mean, tokenism is a big example of the fact that companies don't care. It's like, I need to get this out of the way. What's the quickest way that I could do that, even if it's not ethical? So that shows you that the intent in terms of in the company's mind, if you like, is not in the right place.
You said you had done some research on other countries, and would love to know what other mechanisms then can we possibly consider? Any thoughts on what we should be looking at more strongly in putting our policies together?
Okay, so so a number of countries are doing, let me say, things that are really similar to, well, not to South Africa. South Africa is a little bit, their policies, we don't have a direct policy on gender, and women are subsumed, at least under the previous regulations, women were subsumed under this group of Black people. So Black youth, Black veterans, Black men, et cetera. But for countries that have a distinct policy on gender, they do something that is very similar. So they usually reserve 5% of public spend by value to women-owned businesses, which means that similar program, you have to have a means of identifying, that these are women, that businesses are women-owned. So they have definitional thresholds for what counts as a woman-owned business. They have private sector and public sector agencies who give you, your badge of certification that you are a woman-owned business. And in some contracts in the US, they have a system where for some public contracts, if they know they have enough women-owned businesses in that space, then those contracts are entirely reserved to women. Okay, so that's sort of one way. Then the East African countries, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda, have a system where they reserve, I think, about 30% of public contracts are reserved to target groups. That target groups includes women, persons with disabilities, I think in Tanzania, the elderly, and the youth as well. So women are within that group, and women's portion is supposed to be 5%. So again, they have a certification system where you register as a member of that target group. But the thing that they do is that they are very, especially in Tanzania, they are very keen on business development for women-owned groups. And they also do some things within procurement. So public agencies are not allowed to aggregate contracts, because of course, the larger the contracts, the less able the small businesses are. So you're not allowed to aggregate by default, so that smaller businesses and women-owned businesses can have access. Women-owned businesses are given training and have to complete this training in order to bid, to make sure that they understand how to navigate the procurement system, because of course the complexity of the procurement system is another problem. So those countries sort of work in a similar way. Then there are two other countries that are doing something differently. So Sweden is one. So Sweden doesn't actually have regulations on including women-owned businesses in procurement or awarding contracts to women-owned businesses. But what they do is that they have a system where gender is mainstreamed throughout procurement. So in planning, have public agencies considered the impact that the goods and services will have on gender equality? In the award of the contracts, yes, have they ensured that women-owned businesses are able to participate? So they look at everything through a lens of gender. So even though they don't have a specific reservation or set asides like the other countries, 5% or whatever, gender is a big part of the entire procurement framework. And so, but what that seems to have done, because they're mainstreaming gender, is right now Sweden is, in terms of its gender equality score, is the most highly ranked country in Europe. And it has had that position for the last 10 years. So obviously they're doing something right. So it's not a case of, okay, women should get 5% of public contracts by value or whatever, but women as 40 or 50% of the population should be considered in everything that is done. So that's really interesting. Then the other country is the Dominican Republic. So in 2012 or so, Dominican Republic, their procurement agency was, a woman was appointed to be the director of that agency. And, she began to ask questions. I don't see, women being awarded public contracts in Dominican Republic, what's going on? So she basically started a scheme where she got them to amend the legislation that, at least 5% of contracts would be awarded to women. But she went beyond that, because she did things that would address the bias that women face in things like evaluation. So if they had, if there was an evaluation and women-owned businesses were highly ranked, then they wouldn't decide based on the higher scores. They would put everything into a kind of like a lottery system and put the names into a hat. And so that meant that the bias that women face, because the leaders are male and like to go with the people that they've always gone with, was eliminated, because you have to pull a name out of a hat. And if it's a woman-owned business, then then that's fine. They also did a lot of supplier development for women-owned businesses. And they went, basically her team for over the few years went around the country training people and alerting them that you have these opportunities and you have a right. They created databases of women-owned businesses and all that. So all those activities together meant that I think in like a 5 or 6 year period, they had gone from awarding, less than 1% of public contracts to women to awarding over 20%. Have done better than a country like the US, which their target is 5%, but most years they come in at around 4%.
Wow.
And some of the other countries, barely meet that 5% target. So, but with Dominican Republic, they basically targeted the issue from all angles. So not just the legislative and reservations and the enterprise development, certification, identifying these businesses, because a lot of public agencies will say, well, we don't know where the businesses are. We don't know who is out, which women-owned businesses are out there in the market. So they address all those hurdles and they address the innate bias or the unconscious bias that procurement officials have towards new entrants generally and women in particular. And that meant that they really had a better impact than a lot of countries have had. So I think that the thing is, and I don't know if in South Africa we do this well enough, is actually because we look at everything through the 4 or 5 year political cycle. It seems that we don't devote enough attention, right? So it's like thinking, where do we want to see this in 5 years, in 10 years, and 15 years? Even though we have our national development plans, but in terms of the micro planning, we don't seem to devote attention because, political cycle even sometimes doesn't even last 5 years, right? So it's like, we don't give enough, let me say, thinking space to actually developing policies that can address the issues we have, that are not just sticking a plaster on something, and can give us the long-term results that we want. And it's a result of different things. Obviously, the political cycle is short, and that creates a lot of uncertainty as well. But of course, within the political system itself, there's so many competing voices that perhaps it's difficult to move in one direction, to pull in one direction. But there are other things, as I said, some of these countries that I've named are doing things. But with gender, we have to first address the issue of, is this important? Yeah. And in many places, the answer is that it's not, right? People don't see, I mean, when I did some of my interviews in South Africa, I mean, party managers would be like, yeah, but, women are not the only constituents we have, but they're 50%, right? They're 50%, and then 42% of children in South Africa are raised by single mothers. So if you are looking at addressing poverty in South Africa, then you have to think about how can we empower women, because most of our kids are being raised by single mothers. Again, a legacy of apartheid. To address that, then we must think about women as a serious issue, and not just, well, women are there, but we also have this group and that group. But every group, whatever group you call, women are 50% of that group. But we haven't, I think, given it that it has, and the knock-on effects, the spillover effects that it will have if we take women's economic empowerment seriously through procurement and other systems.
That last point you've raised is so critical, because we've got at the moment, these designated groups, and it's one of 6 designated groups. And so we're choosing, do we focus on Black women, or do we focus on military veterans? And that's an important point you've made. Prof, what are the mechanisms they're using? So you've said they would describe a goal. So here we're going to let me use the word, set aside 5% of our public procurement spend is going to be for women. But what mechanisms are they using? You mentioned Sweden, they're basically just mainstreaming it. So it's a mindset issue, and it's a practices issue when they're going through the process. But what, are they using, the equivalent of a pre-qualification criteria? Are they setting aside, just inviting? What actual mechanisms? And I'm asking to try and understand from you, what should we be focused on a lot more, and giving more focus, more priority to? What mechanisms should we be looking at more? Am I making sense?
Yes. Absolutely. So the mechanisms are set aside. So what the US and Kenya and Dominican Republic allow people from the target group. Now, remember that the Kenyan target group is quite broad. But they would only allow companies that have been registered as being part of that target group to bid. And the US as well, for some contracts, they would only allow women-owned businesses that have been qualified or certified as such to bid as well. So that's the primary mechanism, is we set aside 5% and we award contracts to women-owned businesses and to try to make those targets.
Right.
So that's one way. And in a way, it's sort of the easier way to start. So it's not a bad way to start, to say, you know what, we've identified that there are women in own businesses in these sectors. So identifying, having supplier lists basically is important, and we would limit certain contracts to those women. Now, of course, women-owned businesses can bid outside of the reserved contracts, but at least in terms of the reserved contracts, some of the obstacles, especially things like just the unconscious bias, are removed, because that's sort of, in a way, 50% of the problem. I mean, speaking to some procurement officials in South Africa and outside of South Africa, and they don't want to take a chance on new businesses because, of course, the risks are high for them. So they also feel like, we have to manage our financial risk and our reputational risk and not have new entrants, mess us up. But a lot of new entrants are these, women-owned businesses who are trying to access the market. And then you also have sometimes people, I've heard a number of managers or municipality managers say, well, I don't think a woman can do a good job I don't think a woman should be in road construction business. That's not a woman's job. So again, a woman-owned business comes in those sectors that are traditionally male-dominated. And the mindset is just that, no, this can't go to women. Women should not be in this sector. So addressing that by reserving certain contracts, addressing that bias is important, because beyond issues of, other barriers that women face, not being able to scale up businesses, lack of finance, things like that, that bias is a real mitigating factor against women accessing procurement contracts.
I'm not sure if this is too detailed a question for this discussion now, but do you think we could start using set-asides?
I think it would be a good place to start. There's one agency in South Africa that was very, very intentional about making sure that on big contracts, I mean, the regulations apply, provide for this already, but they were really intentional. They policy that basically mandated contracts over certain thresholds. The roads agency, and what that meant is businesses basically
I'm not sure if it's just on my side, but I'm not seeing Prof Williams and not hearing her. Just also, yeah, it looks like Prof. So we'll just, I think you've lost the connection there, and we'll get you back soon. Let's just quickly see. I know that there was, I think we did lose Prof. So she'll join us soon again. There was a question from Tony. You raised your hand earlier. Do you want to just ask that question? I must say I'm finding this a fascinating discussion so far, and such important perspectives that Prof is sharing. There, you're back again.
Sorry, I was kicked off. I found myself talking to myself.
And we lost you there. Yes, welcome.
Yeah,
sure.
My video. I don't know what's. Yeah, the internet is always annoying. Okay. So I was in the middle of something. I can't remember what
describing
subcontracting.
One of the agencies, and I think I didn't hear which one you said, is already using it deliberately, a set aside type mechanism?
Yes. So the question was about settlements, and I'll, but we have to go for the barriers, because they all, if you say, okay, we reserve 5% of contracts in I don't know, in construction, women-owned businesses maybe in that area, in the sector. So we have to think a lot more broadly. We have to think about even the pipeline of women entrepreneurs in different sectors. You know, so not just addressing the, even thinking, I think I talked about access to finance today. People and women get different, the same circumstances as, and that's a legacy there. So if you look for something as simple as a home loan, higher risk, so you know, of home, of getting bonds, and in terms of business loans, a factor that affects businesses can grow because they're paying out more than and if you think of something simple like home ownership as a way of building wealth, as a way of building additional wealth, then you can already see that beyond be militating against Black entrepreneurship and Black male entrepreneurship. Set aside place to start. Need to think broader. Barriers are, and how we address the, you know, otherwise continue. And Dominican Republic example showed that what can happen in a few short years if you are intentional and really take the issue seriously, if I can say that.
Thanks, Prof. Your the connection isn't great, and we just got you at the back end there with quite a lot of what you said, and I'm hoping that the recording is at least going to pick that up. I wonder if we could possibly talk about just the process now of developing these different policies that is going to happen over the next while. So what the Concourt has basically implied is that, not implied, they have stated directly that each organ of state must determine their preferential procurement policy and do that within the framework, and the framework is mentioned 90-10, 80-20. And so effectively now, because they've said that the minister is it's neither necessary nor expedient for the minister to issue these regulations, it's almost as if the National Treasury's hands have been tied now, and every organ of state is going to now figure out how they're going to award the 10 points or the 20 points. And some are saying that is going to lead to a lot of fragmentation, a lot of confusion by different suppliers, because they're going to have 700 different policies that they're going to have to try and understand and work with. Any thoughts on one? Is that desirable? Is that something that we want, where we've got this fragmentation possibly of policies, where we're moving from a place where everybody knew how the BBBEE scorecard worked? And if you had level 1, you scored 20 points. If it was level 2, you scored 18 points. Everybody knew that. And it was a very easy process to follow, to one where potentially on the 26th of January, we've got 700 different ways that that's going to work. Now, is that desirable, or, and then if not, what do you think should be done to try and address that? Any thoughts? All right, so Prof has lost the connection again. I'm just going to quickly turn on the video here and just see. Yeah, would certainly. Brian, do you want to go ahead? I've noted
Sean,
your comments in the text. Go ahead.
Sorry, I would like to rephrase the point you made. All right. I think the court said we can do 700 preference policies, 700 objectives, 700 set-asides, etc. Right, and that is dependent upon the board of each organization. But you are right. The benefit of the BBBEE system wasn't BBBEE, it was the scorecard and the 10-point allocation. That is something that's within the minister's power to issue a regulation on how we score and allocate the points. It's a scoring mechanism. And we need, as you rightly said,
Brian, are you saying that the minister can issue regulations on how the 10 points and 20 points are going to be scored?
Yes, because that's under the same.
It's not going to happen, Brian. Let's just end it
sorry,
there.
he's
not
the minister. The Constitutional Court said the minister cannot issue a preference policy. All right, but the minister currently issues out the 80, 20 points and the formulas and etc. So this is a mechanistic point of how to work out the points and what type of evidence you need for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an administrative matter, right? Not a policy issue. And that's what I'm saying. It is a gap in our administrative mechanism of applying whatever policy the board wants to choose. And we need to come to a solution on that. As an auditor, how do I verify the points you're claiming on my preference policy is true and you're not lying?
Okay.
As an auditor, how do I verify that? And that's a question I've been asking myself. How do we get around that point?
All right, cool. Thanks, Prof. It looks like you're back, and I think the connection certainly looks a lot better. Your thoughts on the way forward and what we should be doing in the next couple of months in terms of putting these policies together.
Yeah. So okay. So your question as to whether fragmentation is a good idea, I think there has to be some kind of what's the word? Some kind of way to control, right, what organs of state do. I think that, so for instance, as I gave the example of SANRA, that has been very intentional in what they were doing, in encouraging Black businesses, Black or women-owned businesses in construction sector. So I think that you can probably have agencies who say, okay, where we are, this is the issue that we have, and we can use our procurement spend to try to alleviate that issue. So fragmentation can be a benefit in that regard. But I think we also have to have some kind of benchmarks, some kinds of standards that organs of state must meet, so that you're not having, crazy policies, if you like. So but I think that what it means is us. So possibly what should be a useful approach would be Treasury or the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer to say, okay, these are some templates. These are some of the things that as a country we would like to see. So those are things that probably we should have in a national procurement strategy, and organs of state can then pull from that strategy and say, okay, the strategy says, gender is important. The strategy says, trying to develop, youth are important, whatever. What do we want to pick from that? So having some kind of overall strategy, and then organs of state, municipalities, etc., can then pull from strategy and say, okay, these are things. So we still have a common thread, if you like, running through it, because you can have, municipalities in rural areas saying, you know what, the issue here is is male unemployment, right?
Yeah.
Our men are not doing anything, and we have a lot of road construction contracts. Why not do community procurement rather than calling the big companies from Gauteng or wherever? Why don't we get the men together in this community, give them the tools they need and put them to work? So you can have impact at the local level that addresses local needs. So I think the fragmentation is not necessarily a bad thing, but like everything, the way that we do it. But I would like to see something like some kind of standard, some kind of template from National Treasury. Say, look, this is a new system. We're going to this. These are the kind of things that you put, because smaller municipalities, we know, have issues with capacity. For them to develop their own policy, they will either copy and paste from a bigger municipality or whatever, or do something that comes off a little bit weird. So, so it's like have some kind of general, approach and say, this is what, as a country, this is where we're going. These are the things that we want to do. And then allow departments, municipalities, whatever, to put their own flavor on it, depending on what their local circumstances require.
I'm about to ask you if you've got any thoughts in your mind as to how that might look. You don't have to tell us now, but just is that starting to take shape in your mind as to what those standards might look like? And I'm asking you this because the position we're in at the moment in public procurement is we do not have a chief procurement officer that's been in place for long. I'm not sure if she's even sitting in her office at the moment. We do know that the acting chief procurement officer has left and has joined SAPS now. To what extent will the office be able to put something together in the next while in time? And will someone like you be able to share some thoughts that might shape what these standards might look like?
Yes. So I think there are sort of, so in South Africa, there, I don't know, 3-4 big issues, and they're all interrelated. So we know there's, poverty, unemployment, and
race, gender.
And race, gender, right? But they're all interrelated. The thing about South Africa is that we're trying to move from, it hasn't been a long space of time, because what, 25 years, whatever, is a generation. It's not that long. We're trying to move away from a system that took 300 years to build, essentially. And we can't change it in 25 years or 50 years, right? It will take a good while, and what we're missing is the same level of intentionality to change it as it took to build it. And it's that intentionality that is missing. Okay, missing for several reasons. There's pressure, there's political cycles now. In the past, the political system was pretty much cut and dried. But so there's that uncertainty and that flux. But so what I think is that we need to sit down and say, okay, these are our 4 issues. Procurement has a place. It definitely does. But I said procurement should not be the savior. So we need to be firing, with the old system. The religious system was part of it. The educational system was co-opted. Every segment of life we're all pulling in the same direction, which is why it worked so well for so long, right? Even though it was a terrible system, but it was very successful and it achieved its objectives because all guns were firing in the same direction or firing on all cylinders. But now we're not. And it's partly because there hasn't been the same level of intentionality or committing of resources and even understanding, okay, we know this is the problem. Everybody can see the problems, but what are long-lasting ways to address it? And some of those solutions will be slow. They're not going to be overnight. You know, even if you start awarding women-owned businesses contracts today, it doesn't mean you're going to achieve gender equality or full women's economic empowerment tomorrow. It's impossible. You know, this is something that has developed over millennia. It will take a long time. So I think that we need to think, you know, but of course, you mentioned the constraints with National Treasury and the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer. But even that tells you that the problem of intentionality and actually wanting to fix things in a real way is hampered by, you know, shenanigans and nonsense is the only way to describe it. But we need to think, okay, so poverty, what can we do about poverty? It's a local issue as well as a national issue. What is the place of, you know, local municipalities in addressing this? What kind of real poverty alleviation measures can we implement, and which of those measures can piggyback off the procurement system? So I've talked about community procurement. I mean, we spend 30, 40, 50% more than we have to constructing roads because of ethical issues, because of profit margins, because of whatever, right? Than we should. Whereas in the rural areas, you know, you can do this a lot more effectively but it takes more brain power. It takes more planning, more mobilization than the tenders process. But thinking about that, okay, so that is a way of addressing unemployment and poverty in this town, in this, you know, in this rural area, and we stick to that. Okay, because the thing is, with poverty is directly linked to gender-based violence. Poverty impacts gender equality, right? I've talked about women, 42% of children under 18 being raised by single mothers. So you address one of those levers properly, the others will be dragged along just because they are related. So I think that in terms of what standards and what we have to do, I think it really needs, and this is something that the apartheid government cuts short, it needs critical thinking, right? It needs, you know, so it needs us to sit down and say, okay, these are the problems, but what lever can I pull? Can I pull which in this province, in this municipality, which of these 4 levers can I pull properly? Because they will have an impact on the others. So you might even say, you know what, leave gender for a minute and let's deal with employment. Women are also part of that number of unemployed and underemployed. So if we address that properly, we would be addressing poverty. We will be addressing gender equality at the same time. Does that make sense? But the thing is that we're not targeting anything with any level of coherence, of intentionality, of desire for real change. It's all like, okay, let's do this quick. Let's do this now. And, you know, and then nothing gets fixed and we're just throwing money in the bin, billions and billions. So even leaving ethical issues aside and state capture and all that, it's actually having leaders and governments that really want to see a change in South Africa and say, you know what, if I only pick one thing, this is the one thing I'm going to do and I'm going to do it well. Because if you do one thing properly, if you target poverty properly, or you target unemployment poverty properly, or you target gender equality properly, all the others are going to be addressed at the same, because they are interrelated. You know, poverty is a gender issue, unemployment is a gender issue, right? So,
Prof.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Thank you. I know we said we just wanted you for between 10 and 11. I don't know if you've got anything urgent whether you can stay on a little bit longer.
Yeah, sure. I can say a little bit longer.
Thank you. Great. There was a question from I hope he hasn't disappeared now. I think he has.
Yeah, someone had his hand up earlier.
Yes, let's open let's open to questions and see if anyone has any questions that they'd like to ask. I think he may have raised his hand earlier because he is going. I think it was Richard Rapiri, and I think Richard is off now. Anyone else from CIDB that maybe could ask a question on behalf of Richard? Love to hear from you. All right, any questions? So let's see. There's Brian had some points around B-BBEE, PPPFA. Do you think that we should arrange a summit or something fairly urgently to try and get that critical thinking together and get something going? Do you think there's value in doing something like that and having yourself and maybe some other thought leaders in the space, help to shape what those standards might be, and try and involve as many as we can from National Treasury and the Provincial Treasury. I know the Provincial Treasuries are also looking for support and thinking about developing model policies. Do you think that would be worth trying?
Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I need to put a caveat. So when I talk about the lack of critical thinking in the public sector, it's not an indictment of the public sector per se. Yeah. It's an indictment of the employment practices in the public sector. Because in the private sector, you have minds that are sharper than razors, right? And they're all South Africans. So the approach to employment in the public sector sometimes it's not merit-based, and means that we don't always have the best minds. Not in every place. But that sometimes has an impact, when you employ for networks or nepotistic or cadre or whatever you want to call it, then you're going to have that result. But South Africa has, brilliant people like everywhere else, world-class people like everywhere else. So it's not an indictment of the public sector, not an indictment. It's just that sometimes the employment process does not seek out the best people.
Got you. Go ahead, Brian. You've raised your hand.
In the CIDB paperwork, but it's also part of the international standard on procurement, is a concept called targeted procurement, which is very much a set-aside type program. In the CIDB, to me, where the confusion lies, you can't have a preference policy in target procurement because they're effectively the same thing. But the whole concept of target procurement, all right, is it something that we can explore when we critically think through this as a way going forward for using procurement to generate employment?
Yes, I think so. I have to admit, I'm not too familiar with the way construction procurement works. Haven't looked at it in a long time, but I think, if it's from what you describe, it's very similar to set aside or reserve procurement. So I think it can work. But obviously, as I said, I'm not too familiar with it.
Thanks, Brian. We'll have a more focused discussion around construction next week with Alison Anthony, and she's going to be joining us nice and early. I think it's going to be 3 a.m. in the morning on her side, and she'll join us next week. She's not feeling well today and just requested that we push it out till next week. Thanks, Brian. Okay, no other questions? I think, Prof, just very, very significant food for thought that you've shared. And I just want to thank you and ask you if there are some more questions and other topics we'd like to explore. Maybe ask you to come back again.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay.
And if there's nothing else, then I think we are very privileged to have had you here and to share your thoughts. And if you would allow us, we would like to put this on our little YouTube channel. And because I think there's some snippets in here which we're going to be listening to on a regular basis, just to suck up that wisdom and those insights. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Good one. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Hey,
Bye-bye.
Khali. Khali, I hope that helped you. Hey, you got lots of work to do.
Yes, yes. I'm actually Sean, in the process trying to as well bring something forward in terms of having policy for this moving forward to some of our targets in terms of the BEE. So yeah, it did. I couldn't want to miss it. I know being hectic with audits, but I didn't want to miss this one.
Good one. Well done, Khali. And I hope we're not going to be confused in the next couple of days with another 40% set aside statement that we're going to be hearing.
You never know. By the way, August 9th is my birthday. So
August 9th. Oh, there we are. There we are. Well, we'll wish you now in advance for August 9th. So,
thank you.
A very significant day.
But I hope no funny
Good.
statements as well.
Yes. Good. All right. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Sean.
much.
Thank
Good
you,
one.
Prof.
Thank you.
Babe, thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
And Abe, thanks,
Thank
Dara.
Thank you, Prof. Thanks, Sean.
Hey, there we are.
Thank you.
Fakile. Good one.
Thanks,
He
Sean.
was very,
A good
very...
program indeed, eh?
Hey, Ronald, there we are. Nice to
I'm
have you
all
join
right.
us,
That
Ronald.
was really good. That was really good. Thanks to Prof as well.
Good one.
Yep. Keep well then. Bye-bye.
Thanks. All the best to you.